So the purpose of this video is for historical reenactors, specifically those that are doing a British Revolutionary War era, in order to help them reconstruct a knapsack of that era. Now, this particular knapsack that we chose to replicate with the 33rd Regiment of Foot is actually one from the 1790s, which, yeah, it is post-American Revolution, but considering that no original actually exists from that era, there is a little bit of historical guesswork involved in this. So I call it experimental historical archaeology going on here. The pattern is actually proprietary. We've actually kind of put together the pattern and such from our own based on documentation and off of the originals. But if you listen closely enough, you might actually be able to figure out the pattern on your own. So with that, enjoy. All right, boys, let's get familiar with our pieces. So what we have here is, this is our large body piece. We've got our one inner divider that's going to be on the main pack, which will be up against one's back. And then we have the center piece, and we're going to be putting a slit pocket into that. And then we have our two flaps going on. Now, before we begin constructing anything, what we need to do is to do a little bit of preliminary work and work some hems out and things of that nature. So that's going to be our first major step. So the first step is hemming up your flaps for the knapsack. So what I did is that on four sides, you can see I went ahead and ironed it down 1/4 inch, ironed it down once again 1/4 inch because that's your 1/2 inch seam allowance, and I went ahead and whip stitched that down. You could also use a running stitch. It's a little bit debatable on which one is used on the original, so you could do either or. So the next thing I'm going to do is that on one long end for each one of these, I'm going to do the exact same thing. Okay, so now that I've got all three sides that are hemmed and whip stitched up, what I need to do now with these flaps is I need to put buttonholes in. So here's what I did. I went 3.5 inches in, 1 inch up, put a dot, and then I went up from there 3/4 of an inch. Okay, so same thing over here, 3.5 inches in, then 1 inch up, or excuse me, 3/4 of an inch up. So we're gonna have a 3/4 inch buttonhole on each side, which will allow us to get our horn buttons through. So here are my flap pieces. As you can see, I have went ahead and got three sides completely hemmed up, and I have my buttonholes completely done by hand as instructed earlier. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to set these two flaps aside, not going to worry about them right now, and I'm going to move over to my outside of the larger bag. This is actually going to be on the inside once we're all said and done. In fact, down here is where the gusset is going to wind up being. So I've already done this step, and this is what you would have to do along this 19-inch section. So we've got about 16 inches by 19. Along the 19, I've completely hemmed that, as you can see. I've also moved on and done the body portion. Okay, so I got the large body section here. I have hemmed that 19-inch section, as you can see, and done it on the far other end as well. Okay, so key thing here is when you do this, make sure that your hem is towards the correct side. Okay, so this should be folded into the same side as that is folded into, and you should be good. All right, so once that is done, I'm going to set it aside, and I'm going to move over to what will be my slit pocket. This will be actually the spot or the piece that goes directly in the center, and I'm going to put a little slit right up in here. So I'm going to go ahead and do that and then show you what to do. All right, so what I've done with my pocket piece is that I've gone ahead and I've ironed it 1/2 inch all the way around. So that is your proper seam allowance. What I now need to do is mark out where exactly my pocket is going to go. So I need to find my midway point here. Okay, so I've got roughly 18 inches. So obviously 1/2 of 18 is my 9, right? So I'm going to put a little mark there. I'm going to go over here, do the same thing, find my 9. I'm then going to go ahead and mark straight across with my chalk, because at this point, I'm going to put a 7-inch pocket, okay? Now, what that will translate for you is obviously I've got 10, so 10 minus 3 we're going to put a 1/2 inch mark here, put a 1/2 inch mark here, and that is going to be where my pocket opening is going to be. So I'm going to cut that now and then show you how to iron that out. All right, so I've cut my 7-inch slit here, and as you can see, I'm doing this from the back side. You can see all of my my hem. So this is a little bit of a ease factor here. So you see I've got a little bit of a corner there, and I'm going to start working that 1/4 inch with my iron all the way over to the edge, as you can see here. So a little bit of steam, get that going. Okay, I'm going to do the same thing over on this side. So get that opening going. Okay, so now, since I've got this started, I'm going to do it one more time. So I'm going to roll this, and as you can see, the opening is going to be getting larger and larger as I go around. So then start over here. That's really hot, and as you can see, working that opening larger and larger as I go about. So now I got that. I'm going to do the other side, and then I can then simply pin it, and then I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to whip this open and then put bar tacks on the ends, which will then create my opening so it will be secure, and hopefully we will not have any unraveling issues that are going to take place as we go about here. But as you can see, I'm just going to work that out.
Wow.
Sweetie, I'm videoing. All right, so there we go. Okay, so now I've got my pocket opening completely done. It's all whip stitched together there. And now I need to do a bar tack. A bar tack can be a little tricky, but it's going to look like this by the time you're done. That's just a reinforcement piece to make sure that when that takes wear and tear, it's not going to be coming apart. So I'm going to show you how to do this exactly. So what I'm going to do is come in here with my needle, and I'm going to run it underneath. Oh, sorry about that. I'll run it underneath, and then right about where the opening is, just a little bit further in, I'm going to roll that through here about 3 times. So 1, 2, and 3. And from here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a whole bunch of little buttonhole stitches. So I'm going to be going all the way through the bar that I've created with the threads. I'm going to grab some fabric that's underneath it, go back through the loop, pull it taut just like that, and then do it again. And as you can see, I'm just grabbing a little bit of fabric up on the underside. Bit by bit, piece by piece. Luckily, it goes pretty quick. Don't have a whole lot of issues here. So now when I get to the end of the bar, all I gotta do is, I always like to run it up onto the underside. But as you can see, there's my little reinforcement bar right there. So then what I do is, most people don't do this, but I like to go onto the back side, and then I just loop it through all that excess there and do one more final knot just to finish it off nicely. And there we go. I'm going to cut that with my scissors, and I'll be good. So now the real fun begins. So what I've done for the big body piece here is on the side where I have my hem on the ends, I have ironed my 1/2 inch seam allowance all the way down to the other side, and I've done it on both sides, as you can see. All right. What we have is from that point to there is 24 inches. Same thing from that edge to there, 24 inches. So we're now going to fold it over. We're doing a dry fit here as of right now. So we're going to fold it over again. And this is where we're going to start our 2 bags of the knapsack. The center is where our split pocket is going to go. Now, this is why we always dry fit first, because depending on how large our seam allowances are, we might have some issues. So if we look here, you can see, wait a second, that needs to go to there. And over here, same issue. So that means what I need to do is on my ironed seam allowance, I need to bring this in a little, and I need to bring that seam in a little bit in order to fit within this space. So I'm going to go ahead and iron that out, so therefore we can continue from there. Round 2 of the dry fit. So I have opened up and redone my seam allowance here with ironing that out. And as you can see, I match up here, I match up there. That's exactly what I want. Same thing down here. So ideally, what we have is this is 24 or 12 inches, but it's overlapped obviously. We got 10 inches and then 12, and that's the other 24 going on there. So this allows me to then take my center pocket, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to pin this here, I'm going to pin this over there, and then that way I can start working on putting the flaps in on each side here. And then we'll, once I get that pinned up, we'll talk about how to attach that. All right, so here's where we are at. I went ahead and pinned up the bottom here, actually side if you will, and then up here, I actually went ahead and sewed it. Now, as you can see, it is a whip stitch. Yeah, this whole outer exterior part all the way around is actually put together with a whip stitch. Now, what I've done is obviously whip stitched here, and I want to go ahead and whip stitch that down as well. And then I'm going to take my flaps. As I have went ahead and put a 1/2 inch seam allowance here on that part of the pocket flap, and done the same thing on this one. So I'm going to line this up just underneath that flap, like so. Line it up and then evenly place it. And unlike here and here where it will be a whip stitch, this is actually going to be a running stitch, real tight running stitch. And what that will do is that this is going to connect the pocket flap to the upper part of the pack with the slit pocket. And I'm going to do the same thing up over on this side as well. So here we are. We have our flaps attached to our slit pocket piece and a very tight running stitch all the way down to a whip stitch across here, and then back to a running stitch, all attaching those flaps. Okay. At this point, the pack is completely symmetrical. Now, if you ordered a kit and that's what you got from myself or Radford, you have a regimental crest already pre-painted on the front. And that's the side that we're going to be dealing with next. So you'd have the, the crown, and then obviously, George's symbol, that kind of thing, 33rd Regiment across there. Okay, that's the part we're going to deal with first. So we're going to call this the front of the pack. Right. So with this, what we're going to do is this particular piece, we're going to fold this up. We're then going to go ahead and put this down. We're going to pin this all along here, pin it all around here, and then we're going to go ahead and do a nice tight whip stitch all the way down there, and a nice quick whip stitch all the way down there. We'll deal with the main portion of the next bag in the next step. But again, we're going to be working with the side that has the regimental crest here, and again, working on a whip stitch just on those two little sides. Well, we have completed our outside pocket. We've got a very tight whip stitch going all the way down on the side. And one of the things that I did was I went ahead and I carried that over towards the flap and also did a little tack bar there, because this is going to take a good amount of wear and tear as you're putting your stuff in and out of that pack. Did the same thing over here, tack bar, whip stitched it, and then all the way down on that end. So now we're ready to start messing around with the larger bag, which is the one that goes up against your back. But we got to do with this piece first. So going back to the piece that we have worked with before, we went ahead and whip stitched this, right, just on the 19-inch edge. And I have already gone ahead and done a 1/2 inch here, a 1/2 inch ironing out the seam there, and a 1/2 inch there at the bottom. You'll note I have a pin here, and that, ladies and gentlemen, is 1 foot from this point, from the edge, all the way to the pin, and that is 3 inches. What's going to happen at this point, oh, by the way, sorry, also put the little pin over here for 1 foot, right? What's going to happen from here is I'm going to fold this to there, right at the pin, and that's my 3 inches, right? And then I'm going to go ahead and do it once again to here. And what that's going to do is this is going to create the gusset at the very bottom of the pack when we're all said and done. So I'm going to iron that out and show you what that looks like from there. So here's where we are at now. Okay. As noted earlier, I went ahead and I ironed this out. So here is our gusset. Okay. What's going to happen here is eventually this is going to be tacked down onto this piece, and this is going to wind up getting tacked down on top of this. So watch this very carefully. I'm going to take this large piece here. I'm going to flip it over so all the seams are going to be down. And then I'm going to start lining it up on the edges. I'm going to put the flap up. I'm going to come down here, and then I'm going to take those pins, and you can see I've got sort of a triple layer factor going on here. I'm going to line all this up all the way to the gusset like that. And I'm going to start whip stitching this down entirely on the side. So I'm going to pin that, and then I'll go ahead and show you what that looks like. So as I was pinning all of this and got my pocket flap here, one of the things that I noticed is that I've got a lot of bulk going on right here. So considering that this is eventually going to get sewn down to this, this piece to this piece, what I'm going to do, and oh, by the way, it also gets painted over. So I'm actually going to cut out some of this bulk here. So, because otherwise this is going to be, that's almost a 1/4 inch worth of stuff right there, which is going to kill you trying to sew through it. So I'm going to go ahead and again take out some of this bulk. So I'm just going to cut down at a slight angle, roughly at about a 45. Take that out of there. So I'm going to do that on both of these pieces as they overlap. And that's going to help pretty significantly with getting that to lay down right. Okay. So a little bit less. In fact, I'll take a little more off there because I can go almost up to the edge entirely. Yeah, much better. And that's going to enable me to actually, get the needle through there nice and easily. Let's go ahead and take a look at our finished sewing project. So this is the outside of the pack. Obviously, this is the outer flap. This is where the regimental crest is going to wind up being. So as we open this up, here's what we have. We have a single pocket and flap here, okay? And we have our inner slit pocket, and this is our larger bag, and this part goes up against the back. And as we can see, I've got this a tight whip stitch all the way down, and this is where our gusset is. And of course, then our seam as the whip stitch continues across all the way. Again, gusset and back up. I'm not going to worry about putting the buttons on until once we get all the painting done. In fact, that is going to be our next step. Well, as you can see, I kind of fast forwarded and went ahead and did the painting process. It's got 2 coats of a yellow ochre, so the front or The exposed side is completely painted for waterproofing, and the inside has a 2.5-inch border, likewise painted, in order to try and waterproof the inside as much as possible. So at this point, I am ready to begin putting on my regimental crest and insignia. Now, if you got a kit from me, well, you can see that that's actually already on here. So all you had to do was paint around the crest. But regardless, just for the purpose of this video, I'm going to go ahead and go through the steps of painting the regimental crest on. What I've done is printed up the regimental crest as kind of a historical guesswork here for the design. But with a lot of Revolutionary War era stuff, it's kind of a experimental archaeology going on here. So as you can see, I have went ahead and cut out some of the items in this particular stencil, and same thing with this one. So the idea is that once I go ahead and put and pencil one in, I can then overlay the other on top of that as well. Here is the finished regimental crest. Came out pretty good. Just started off by, first of all, painting the red oval, and then, as mentioned earlier, just overlaying everything over, and then marking it with a pencil, and then drawing in the rest, painting in the rest, so everything could be done nicely in there. So there we go. Next step here is to start attaching all the leather pieces, so definitely on the downward side. Time to put the leather straps onto the outer flap. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to go from this corner to here at 3.5 inches. We're going to go from the corner up to that point at 2.5, and then from here to here, that's going to be our 5 inches. Before I can sew anything, I'm going to have to punch through this with a sewing awl, because that's some pretty thick stuff. I don't want to be taking that alone with a needle. So let's go ahead and get that done. So let's go ahead and talk about how we're going to attach this. I've got about a foot of white waxed linen thread. So I'm going to go ahead and start, put a knot on the end. And then I'm going to start over here, simply run that through. And you'll see that I went ahead and put holes here with my awl. I got an extra hole to the left, an extra hole to the right. And now I'm simply going to run it through that last hole, like so. Leave it just a little bit loose so I can go up over onto the back side, find the hole, run it through, move that knot aside, and run it. Now, I could be using a saddle stitch here, in which I would have 2 needles going back and forth, but for a project as small as this, with all these little tiny pieces, putting this into my stitching awl and horse would actually just be, to be perfectly honest, just a waste of time. So with this, I'm going to go through, and then what's going to happen is as soon as I get back to the end, I'm actually going to flip it and go back the other direction. So just a back and forth type motion. This is where the good leather needle comes in handy, because it's got a little bit of a blunt end, so I can go back and forth. When I get to the end, I am going to go ahead and do this twice, just because it's going to allow me to give that end just a little bit more help, because that's going to be a tension point as I'm going to be using this over the various years. And again, I'm just going to go back like so. And almost done here. And it's just going to be quick, easy, and dirty here. Go through that last little bit. And as you can see, I'm reinforcing it. And normally, even when you're like running with a sewing machine, if you just go back a few stitches, this is going to be sufficient enough to hold this in place for about as long as you're going to need it. So you don't need to really knot it or anything like that. So I went back, I went across, and then I went back about 3 stitches, and that is done. Now I can move on to the next piece. I'm just kind of smoothing that over there just a little bit with the wax, and that's it. All 6 outer straps have now been attached and sewn in. So the next step is going to be worrying about putting the buckles on the opposite end of the pack over here. This is the part that's going to be up against your back. I went ahead and actually put some two of the buckles already in place. Okay, so you can see how the direction of the buckle, the prong, should go so that it will match up with the belted end properly, right? Easy thing to mistake here is if you put this buckle on backwards, and that obviously would be a problem. Pretty self-explanatory here in that you have, these buckles will be reversed, obviously, when the thing is opened up here. But note the bottom straps. This is where the long strap will attach over and in. Note what side of the gusset this goes on. Okay, that's the back of the pack, and there's the gusset. Make sure you put it on that side. You're also going to have the corresponding larger buckle, which will be part of the pack strap, shoulder strap, that's going to go over there eventually. So I'm going to go ahead and keep working on getting the other buckle placements put in. So I've got my tabs onto the outside flap. I've got my buckles attached to the larger gusseted bag. And note the orientation of the buckles, so therefore that lines up well with the tabs that are going on here. And I also attached the larger 1.25" buckles that are going to be used for the shoulder straps themselves. Those you're going to put in at 1.5 inches from the edge. And just for reference sake, the smaller buckle, which is for the tab of the pack, that is the 3.5 inches going on there. So I am now at the point where I can begin putting the larger shoulder straps on. And that, you're going to take your leather reinforcement pieces that I've set into the inner part of the gusseted bag, and the edge here to there is going to be 5 inches. So again, from there to there, 5 inches. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to pre-punch these holes in with a sewing awl, so then that way I can see the holes on the other side. And I also did it over here where it's from that point to here is 5 inches. So that will give me my proper spacing that I need. And here is our finished product. As you can see, we have attached our shoulder straps on here. Using the punch awl, we were able to put the holes through, and you could see that on the canvas, which made it nice and easy in order to run that back through. We then went ahead and did our chest straps here. Simply sewed them together, put them through the loops, nice and easy. And that is what we call done. Hope you enjoyed this video. If you liked it, you know what to do. Take care.